We survived for thousands of years before humanity arrived, the Zelani trade minister pointed out. Because you were lucky, Rodriguez replied bluntly. The Vorthic were the first species you encountered that couldn't be reasoned with. They won't be the last. This galaxy is a dangerous place, and peaceful species don't survive long without someone willing to be dangerous on their behalf. Colonel Parker entered the chamber, carrying a datapad with the latest intelligence reports. Admiral, we've detected 3 separate hostile fleets moving into former Vorthic territory. Looks like scavenger species testing coalition defenses. Rodriguez turned to the council. There's your answer. The Vorthic are gone, but nature abhors a vacuum. Other predator species are already moving in to fill the gap. We could negotiate with them, Zara suggested hopefully. You could try, Rodriguez agreed. But while you're talking, they'll be positioning for attack. By the time you realize negotiation has failed, it might be too late to mount an effective defense. The council members exchanged worried glances. They wanted the security that human military power provided, but they feared the implications of permanent dependence on a species capable of total war. What are you proposing? Admiral Tissara asked finally. Rodriguez had given this considerable thought during the long months of hunting down Vorthic survivors. A partnership, not an occupation. Human forces maintain a presence in coalition. Space, but under joint command authority. We handle the threats that require military solutions, while you handle diplomacy, trade, and cultural exchange. A permanent military alliance, the Terran delegate rumbled. A survival strategy, Rodriguez corrected. The coalition called for help because your peaceful methods weren't sufficient to protect your civilization. That fundamental problem hasn't changed just because the Vorthic are gone. The debate continued for hours, but Rodriguez could see the eventual outcome in their body language. Fear of humanity was strong, but fear of the unknown was stronger. The coalition species had learned that the galaxy contained threats that couldn't be negotiated away, and they lacked the capacity to fight such threats themselves, not in the end. They voted to accept Rodriguez's proposal. Human military forces would remain in coalition space as a permanent defense force, operating under joint oversight, but with operational independence. As the session ended and the delegates began filing out, Zara approached Rodriguez privately. Do you think we made the right choice? She asked quietly. Rodriguez considered the question carefully. You made the only choice that ensures your species survive long enough to ask that question again in 100 years. But at what cost? Zara pressed. We've become dependent on a species that frightens us. Every civilization faces that choice eventually, Rodriguez replied. You can maintain your ideals and principles, or you can survive. Very rarely do you get to do both. And which did humanity choose? Rodriguez smiled, but there was sadness in it. We chose survival. That's why we're still here to have this conversation. As Rodriguez returned to the Guardian, she found Lieutenant Johnson waiting with the day's reports. The young officer had grown during their time in coalition space, developing the kind of steady professionalism that came from facing impossible situations and finding solutions. The new recruits from Earth arrived this morning, Johnson reported. 200 fresh personnel, including Lieutenant Danny Clark from the Rangers. Rodriguez nodded. The flow of human military personnel into coalition space would continue. Each one sworn to protect species that would never fully trust them. What's their mission briefing going to cover? Johnson asked. Rodriguez looked out at the stars through the observation port. Somewhere out there, new threats were already forming. Species that would test coalition defenses, pirates that would prey on peaceful trade routes, and perhaps someday another enemy like the Vorthic that would threaten everything they had worked to protect. The same thing it always covers, she said finally. They're not here to be heroes. Heroes get people killed. They're here to be soldiers, to stand watch in the dark so that other species can sleep peacefully in the light. And if those species never appreciate what we're doing? Rodriguez shrugged. Appreciation was never part of the mission parameters. Success was. As the Guardian began its patrol of the outer systems, Rodriguez reflected on what humanity had become in galactic civilization. They were the guardians that other species needed but never wanted, the violent solution that peaceful minds preferred not to think about. The Coalition had wanted heroes, but heroes couldn't have saved them. Heroes fought fair and died gloriously, for noble causes. Soldiers fought to win and lived to fight another day. Humanity had chosen to be soldiers, and the galaxy was safer for it, even if they would never be thanked for that choice. Infestation. Human soldiers moved through the dreadnoughts like antibodies attacking a virus, destroying everything that kept the massive bioships functional. Within 6 hours, 37 Harvester dreadnoughts were drifting hulks. The Vorthik. Empire's ultimate weapon had been turned into a tomb for its creator's dot. As the Coalition fleet surveyed the aftermath, Admiral Tissara found Captain Rodriguez in the observation deck, staring out at the floating wreckage. "It's over," the Admiral said quietly. "Not yet," Rodriguez replied. "We still have cleanup to finish." "What do you mean?" Rodriguez turned to face the alien officer, and Tissara was disturbed by what she saw in the human's eyes. There was no satisfaction, no joy in victory. Only the cold calculation of a predator that hadn't finished hunting. "We're going to make sure the Vorthik can never threaten anyone again," Rodriguez said simply. "That means hunting down every last one of them." Admiral's skin shifted to a worried yellow. "You're talking about extinction." "I'm talking about making sure this never happens again," Rodriguez corrected. "The Vorthik chose to fight a war of extermination. Now they get to find out what it feels like to be on the losing side of one." As human forces began the systematic elimination of the remaining Vorthik holdings, the Coalition species finally understood what they had unleashed. They had called for heroes to save them, but heroes would have been satisfied with victory. They had gotten soldiers instead, and soldiers understood that the job wasn't finished until the enemy could never threaten anyone again. 6 months after the destruction of the Harvester dreadnoughts, the galaxy was finally quiet. The Vorthik Empire existed only in historical records, their biomechanical horrors reduced to scrap metal floating in empty space. But the peace had come at a price that the Coalition was only beginning to understand. Admiral Rodriguez, recently promoted from captain, stood in the command center of the newly commissioned UN's Guardian. Around her, human personnel monitored communications from across Coalition space, tracking down the last scattered Vorthik survivors with methodical efficiency. "Final sweep of the outer rim is complete," reported Major Wells, her rangers having just returned from a 3-week hunt through abandoned star systems. "No Vorthik signatures detected. The last bioforms were eliminated 2 days ago." Rodriguez nodded without emotion. "Any signs they had established backup breeding facilities?" "Negative. We found some old research data, but nothing functional. Whatever the Vorthik were, they're extinct now." The word hung in the air like a judgment. Extinct. An entire species wiped from existence by human military efficiency. It should have felt like victory. But Rodriguez found herself thinking about the implications. Ambassador Ziara Valthari materialized in the communication hologram, her crystalline form, flickering with complex patterns that Rodriguez had learned, indicated deep worry. "Admiral, the Coalition Council requires your presence for an important discussion," she said formally. "What's the topic?" Rodriguez asked, though she suspected she already knew. "The future of human Coalition relations." Zara replied carefully. "There are concerns about humanity's continued military presence in Coalition space," Rodriguez sighed. She had been expecting this conversation for weeks. I'll be there in 6 hours. The Coalition Council Chamber had been rebuilt since the war. The new design was more secure, with better defensive systems and multiple escape routes. The peaceful species had learned some hard lessons about the realities of galactic politics. Rodriguez entered to find representatives from all 12 Coalition species waiting for her. The atmosphere was tense, nothing like the grateful celebration that had followed their victory over the Vorthic. Admiral Rodriguez, Zara began formally. The Coalition wishes to express its gratitude for humanity's role in ending the Vorthic threat. But, Rodriguez said, recognizing the diplomatic setup, but there are concerns about the methods employed and their long-term implications. Admiral Tisara continued. Her skin displayed the deep blue of serious worry. The complete elimination of an entire species troubles many of our member worlds. The luminary delegate floated forward, his light form pulsing with agitation. Genocide is not something the Coalition can officially endorse, even when directed against our enemies. Rodriguez had prepared for this moment. The Vorthic made it clear that coexistence was impossible. They consumed entire civilizations and showed no capacity for negotiation or compromise. Given those parameters, partial victory would have only delayed the inevitable. You could have captured survivors, the Kethmer representative croaked. Studied them, perhaps found a way to change their nature. With what resources? Rodriguez asked bluntly. Your own scientists admitted that Vorthic biology was designed for consumption and expansion. There was no evidence they could be modified or contained safely. The Terran delegate shifted his rocky bulk. The issue is not just what you did, but how easily you did it. Your species demonstrated a capacity for systematic extermination that concerns many of our member worlds. Rodriguez looked around the chamber, reading the body language of 12 different species. Fear. That's what she saw in all of them. Not of the Vorthic anymore, but of humanity itself. You're afraid of us, she said simply. The silence that followed confirmed her assessment. We called you heroes, Zara said quietly, her crystalline form dimming. We wanted noble warriors to save us with honor and courage. Instead, you got problem solvers, Rodriguez replied. People who understood that sometimes saving civilization requires uncivilized methods. The question, Admiral Tisara said carefully, is what happens now? The threat is gone, but your military forces remain in Coalition space. Many species. Wonder if we've simply traded one dangerous neighbor for another. Rodriguez had expected this too. The gratitude phase was over, and now came the fear phase. It was a pattern as old as warfare itself. What exactly are you asking? She said. The avian representative chirped nervously before speaking. Some member worlds believe it would be best if human forces withdrew to your home system. The war is over. There's no longer a need for such a large military presence. And leave you defenseless when the next threat appears? Rodriguez asked. The emergency session of the Coalition Council was unlike any meeting in their history. For the first time, the peaceful species were discussing Total War. Ambassador Zara Valfari's crystalline form flickered with stress patterns as she presented. The latest intelligence. The Vorthic Empire has begun their final offensive. 37 Harvester dreadnoughts are moving toward our core worlds. At their current speed, they will arrive within 6 weeks. The holographic display showed the massive biomechanical ships, each one capable of consuming an entire planet. Unlike the smaller vessels the Coalition had faced before, these were world killers designed to end civilizations completely. Our conventional forces cannot stop them, Admiral Tisara admitted, her skin displaying deep blue resignation. Even with human tactical support, we lack the firepower to engage ships of this magnitude. Captain Rodriguez sat at the council table, the first human ever to be formally invited to address the Coalition leadership. Around her, representatives of 12 species waited to hear what Earth's soldiers could do against impossible odds. They, Vorthik, have made a mistake, she said simply. What mistake? Asked the Kethmar delegate, his amphibian features creased with worry. They've decided to fight a war of extermination, Rodriguez replied. That's a game humans invented. The Council. Members shifted uncomfortably. They had seen what human tactics could accomplish in smaller engagements, but this was different. This was survival of entire civilizations. What are you proposing? Zara asked quietly. Rodriguez stood and activated her own tactical display. Total spectrum dominance. We don't just fight their military forces. We break their entire civilization. The alien delegates recoiled at the casual way she discussed genocide. You're talking about mass murder, the luminary representative whispered, his light form dimming with horror. I'm talking about survival, Rodriguez corrected. The Vorthik want to consume every living being in coalition space. They've made it clear that negotiation is impossible and surrender means death. That leaves only one option. Admiral Tissara leaned forward. Even if we agreed to such methods, we lack the resources. The human fleet is too small to engage 37 dreadnoughts. Which is why I've called for reinforcements, Rodriguez said Dot, as if summoned by her words, the tactical display updated with new contacts. The Un's retribution had just emerged from hyperspace, followed by 4 escort vessels. The Coalition officers stared as the manifest data appeared. 500 additional personnel, Rodriguez announced, including some of Earth's most experienced special operations units. Within hours, the Coalition flagship was swarming with human military personnel. Marine Colonel Steve Parker brought 200 Marines trained for ship-to-ship combat. Army Ranger Major Patricia Wells led elite reconnaissance teams. Navy SEAL Commander Ryan Foster arrived with underwater assault specialists adapted for zero-gravity operations. Air Force Colonel Michelle Torres commanded pilots trained to fly anything with engines. But it wasn't just the numbers that changed the atmosphere aboard the ship. These new arrivals were different from Rodriguez's initial team. Harder, more focused, with the kind of cold professionalism that came from fighting impossible battles and winning them. The situation is simple, Rodriguez explained to her expanded command staff in the human briefing room. The enemy wants to end multiple civilizations. Our job is to end theirs first. Lieutenant Johnson had spent weeks analyzing Vorthik psychology and culture. They operate on a strict hierarchical system. Biomechanical creatures at the bottom, bioforms in the middle, and pure Vorthik consciousness at the top. Remove the top level and everything below collapses. How do we reach their leadership? Colonel Parker asked. Those dreadnoughts are heavily defended. We don't attack the dreadnoughts directly, Commander Foster replied, studying the tactical data. We make them come to us. Major Wells spread intelligence reports across the table. The Vorthik Empire depends on resource extraction from conquered worlds. They need a steady supply of biological matter to fuel their war machine. Cut off their supply lines, and they become desperate. Desperate enemies make mistakes, Rodriguez agreed. And when they make mistakes, we kill them. The human strategy was unlike anything the Coalition had ever imagined. Instead of preparing for defensive battles, the humans began planning offensive operations across multiple star systems. They identified every Vorthik supply depot, processing facility, and staging area within 50 light years. Then they began systematically destroying them all. The attacks weren't random raids. They were carefully coordinated strikes designed to force the Vorthik into specific response patterns. When the enemy sent forces to protect their supply lines, human teams were waiting with ambushes. When they tried to establish new facilities, sabotage teams destroyed them before they became operational. But the psychological warfare was even more devastating. Corporal Foster, now promoted to technical specialist, had become an expert at turning Vorthic biotechnology against itself. Working with captured equipment, she developed viruses that could infect their biological networks. Think of it as a computer virus, but for living systems, she explained to the horrified coalition observers. Once it spreads through their communication network, it makes their bioforms attack each other instead of us. The first deployment of the virus was terrifyingly effective. An entire Vorthic battle fleet turned on itself in the middle of space, bioships consuming each other in a feeding frenzy that lasted for hours. This is biological warfare on a massive scale, Admiral. Tisara protested when she learned of the weapon. It violates every treaty governing civilized conflict. The Vorthic violated those treaties when they decided to eat entire populations. Colonel Parker replied coldly. We're just returning the favor. Meanwhile, Ranger teams led by Major Wells were conducting deep penetration missions into Vorthic-controlled space. Their job wasn't to fight battles, but to gather intelligence and eliminate key targets. Assassination, Zara said when she learned of the operations. You're murdering their commanders. We're removing obstacles to peace, Wells corrected. Every Vorthic leader we eliminate is one less creature directing the consumption of civilian populations. The campaign continued for weeks, and its effects rippled throughout the Vorthic Empire. Supply shortages forced bioships to cannibalize each other for resources. Command failures led to friendly fire incidents as confused units attacked their own forces. The carefully ordered hierarchy that held their civilization together began to crack. But the humans weren't finished. SEAL teams led by Commander Foster began targeting something even more fundamental, the Vorthic breeding facilities. Deep in their home systems, massive biocomplexes produced the creatures that powered their war machine. We're not just fighting this war, Foster explained to his team as they prepared for their most dangerous mission. We're ending it permanently. The assault on the primary breeding facility was a masterpiece of human military planning. While diversionary forces attacked obvious targets, Foster's SEALs infiltrated the complex's biological security systems. What? They found inside horrified even the hardened commandos. Millions of sentient beings from dozens of species, kept alive in biomechanical wombs to be slowly converted into Vorthic war creatures. Jesus Christ, whispered one of the SEALs. They're not just killing people, they're turning them into weapons. Foster's voice was steady over the comb, but his eyes were cold as winter. Plant the charges, all of them. We're burning this place to the ground. The explosion could be seen from orbit. When it was over, the Vorthic Empire had lost the ability to create new bioforms. The war machine that had consumed dozens of civilizations was suddenly facing resource starvation. That's when the harvester dreadnoughts made their fatal mistake. Desperate for biological matter to sustain their remaining forces, they accelerated their advance toward coalition core worlds. Instead of the methodical consumption they preferred, they rushed forward in a disorganized swarm. They took the bait, Rodriguez observed with grim satisfaction as the enemy fleet approached the Zelani home system. Now we spring the trap. The coalition fleet waited in perfect formation, looking like a traditional defensive formation. The Vorthic dreadnoughts moved to attack, confident that their massive ships could overwhelm any opposition. They never saw the human strike teams that had been waiting for weeks in stealth ships positioned throughout the system. As the dreadnoughts closed for what they thought would be an easy victory, 50 human boarding parties launched simultaneously. Using captured Vorthic biotechnology against itself, they penetrated the massive ship's defenses and began systematic destruction from within. Target the command bioforms first, Rodriguez ordered over the tactical network, then the power distribution systems. Make these things tear themselves apart. The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Instead of ship fighting ship in honorable combat, it was an un. The evacuation of Kethros Prime should have been simple. Coalition forces had done it hundreds of times before. Move in quietly, load the civilians onto transport ships, and retreat before the Vorthik arrived in force. Captain Rodriguez stood in the planning room aboard the Harmony of Worlds, staring at Admiral Tissara's tactical display with growing frustration. "This plan will get everyone killed," she said bluntly. The Admiral's skin shifted to a defensive orange color. "This is standard coalition evacuation protocol. We minimize contact with hostile forces and prioritize civilian safety. Your protocol assumes the enemy will play by the same rules you do," Rodriguez replied. "The Vorthik don't care about civilian casualties. They want those people alive so they can process them into biofuel." Lieutenant Maya Johnson pulled up intelligence reports on her tablet. "The enemy has 3 destroyer-class bioships in orbit, and at least 50 ground units surrounding the civilian settlements. Your plan sends our transports right into a trap." "We must try," Admiral Tissara insisted. 2 million Kethmer civilians are depending on us. "And they'll all die if we do this your way," Sergeant Tony Walsh said from across the room. "Ma'am, with respect, you're thinking like prey. We need to think like predators." Rodriguez walked to the display and began highlighting different areas. "Forget your standard protocol. We're going to do this the human way." She divided the tactical map into 3 zones. "Walsh, you take Alpha Team here." She pointed to the northern settlement cluster. "Your job is to make noise. Lots of it. Draw every Vorthik unit in the area toward your position." Walsh grinned. "How much noise are we talking about?" "Enough to convince them that the entire human fleet just landed in their backyard," Rodriguez replied. "Use explosives, jamming equipment, whatever it takes. Make them think you're the main assault force." She turned to Johnson. "Maya, Bravo team sets up here and here. 2 positions flanked the main Vorthik approach routes. Once they commit to attacking Alpha Team, you hit them from the sides. But don't try to win. Just hurt them and disappear." "Classic anvil and hammer," Johnson nodded. "What about the civilians?" Rodriguez indicated the 3rd zone. "Carlos takes Charlie Team directly to the population centers, while the Vorthik are busy with us. Load them fast and get them out through the southern jump point." Staff Sergeant Carlos Rivera studied the plan carefully. "That leaves Alpha and Bravo teams cut off from extraction routes." "We'll manage," Rodriguez said. "The mission is to save those civilians, not to bring everyone home safely." Admiral Tissara looked horrified. "You're planning to sacrifice your own people?" "We're planning to do our jobs," Walsh corrected. "Sometimes that means taking risks so others don't have to." The operation began 12 hours later. The Coalition forces watched in amazement as the humans implemented their plan with ruthless efficiency. Alpha Team landed in a perfect storm of destruction. Walsh had somehow acquired enough Coalition demolition charges to level a small city. Explosions rippled across the northern settlements as his team systematically destroyed anything that might provide cover for advancing Vorthik forces. "Contacts inbound," reported Corporal Amanda Foster over the com. "Lots of them. The biomechanical signatures approaching from 3 directions." "Perfect," Walsh replied calmly. "Keep hitting them with everything we have. Make them think we're trying to take the whole planet." The Vorthik response was immediate and overwhelming. Bioships descended from orbit, while ground units converged on Alpha Team's position. The enemy brought everything they had, expecting to crush what appeared to be a full-scale human assault. That's when Bravo Team struck. Johnson's people had positioned themselves perfectly, using the planet's natural terrain to mask their approach. As the Vorthik forces rushed toward the noise of Alpha Team's engagement, they exposed their flanks to devastating crossfire. "Light them up," Johnson ordered. Human weapons tore into the advancing biomechanical creatures. These weren't the clean energy weapons the Coalition used. Human firearms were designed to cause maximum damage to organic targets, and the Vorthic's bioships proved disturbingly vulnerable to old-fashioned explosives and armor-piercing rounds. Meanwhile, Charlie Team moved like ghosts through the abandoned settlements. Rivera's people had studied Kethmer psychology and knew exactly how to motivate panicked civilians. "We're not here to save your city," Rivera told the local leaders. "Your city is already lost. We're here to save your people, but only if you move right now." The blunt honesty worked better than any inspiring speech. Within 2 hours, civilian transports were lifting off loaded with refugees, while the Vorthek remained focused on the diversionary battle to the north. But the human teams had one more. Surprise waiting. Foster had spent the previous day studying captured Vorthik biotechnology. With typical human adaptability, she had figured out how to interface their electronics with alien biological systems. "Broadcasting on all Vorthik frequencies," she reported to Walsh. "Uploading the psychological warfare package now." Through the enemy's own communication network, the humans began transmitting sounds designed to trigger fear responses in Vorthik bioforms. They had recorded the death cries of captured creatures and amplified them to suggest massive casualties. Effect was devastating. Vorthik ground units began retreating in confusion as their biomechanical components received contradictory signals. The enemy's coordination collapsed as their own network was turned against them. "This is impossible," Admiral Tissara whispered, watching the tactical displays aboard the Harmony of Worlds. "How are they doing this?" "They're fighting dirty," replied one of her junior officers, and there was something like admiration in his voice. The evacuation concluded with textbook precision. Charlie Team extracted the last of the civilians, while Alpha and Bravo teams fought a running retreat to their own pickup zones. When the smoke cleared, 2 million Kethmer refugees were safe aboard Coalition transports, and the Vorthik ground forces were in complete disarray. The cost had been remarkably light. 3 humans wounded, none killed. The Vorthik had lost approximately 40% of their ground forces and 2 of their biodash ships. But the real victory wasn't measured in casualties. As the Coalition fleet prepared to jump away from Kethros Prime, Admiral Tissara confronted Captain Rodriguez in the command center. "Your methods were effective," she admitted reluctantly, "but they were also brutal. You used deception, psychological manipulation, and asymmetric warfare." "Yes, we did," Rodriguez replied without shame. "That's not how civilized species conduct warfare," the Admiral continued. Rodriguez turned to face the alien officer directly. "Ma'am, those 2 million civilians in your cargo holds don't care about civilized warfare. They care about being alive. But at what cost?" Tissara asked. "You've shown us tactics that violate every principle of honorable combat." "Honor is something you can afford when you're not facing extinction," Rodriguez said quietly. "Your people called for help because honorable combat was getting you killed. We gave you what you needed, not what you wanted." The Admiral's skin shifted through several color changes as she struggled with conflicting emotions. The other Coalition species are disturbed by what they witnessed today. They're questioning whether we made the right choice in allying with humanity. Rodriguez nodded. They should be disturbed. What we did today should disturb anyone with a conscience. She paused, but it worked. Those civilians are alive because we were willing to be the monsters in this situation. As the fleet jumped away from the ruined planet, word of the human victory spread throughout Coalition space. Some species were grateful for the effective rescue of so many lives. Others worried about the methods humanity had employed. But in the depths of space, the Vorthik Empire was also taking notice. The biomechanical creatures that had survived the battle carried detailed information about their new enemies back to their commanders. Humanity had announced their presence in galactic warfare, and the universe would never be quite the same. The Coalition had wanted heroes to save them, but they had gotten something far more dangerous: problem solvers, who would do whatever it took to complete the mission. The question was whether the cure would prove more dangerous than the disease. The Coalition flagship Harmony of Worlds had never seen anything like the human transport ship. The UN's Defiant was angular and scarred, built for function rather than beauty. No elegant curves or artistic designs decorated its hull. Instead, thick armor plating and weapon systems covered every surface. Ambassador Zara Velthari watched through the observation deck as the human ship docked. She had expected maybe 20 or 30 heroes to answer their call. Instead, the manifest showed 200 military personnel. 200, she murmured to Admiral Tessara, the Coalition's fleet commander. That seems like many for a diplomatic mission. The Admiral's tentacles twitched nervously. Perhaps they misunderstood our request. Maybe they think we need a larger delegation. The docking bay filled with Coalition dignitaries waiting to welcome Earth's champions. They had prepared speeches about honor and nobility. Banners hung from the walls, showing the symbols of peace and cooperation that defined Coalition society. The airlock opened with a sharp hiss. Captain Lisa Rodriguez stepped through first, followed by her command team. The aliens immediately noticed. Something was wrong. These humans didn't look like heroes from their stories. They wore practical combat gear instead of ceremonial armor. Their weapons were clearly functional tools, not decorative symbols of office. Rodriguez surveyed the crowd of aliens with cold, calculating eyes. Behind her, Sergeant Tony Walsh checked the exits, while Lieutenant Maya Johnson scanned for potential threats. Their movements were smooth and professional, but they made the alien observers deeply uncomfortable. "Welcome to the Harmony of Worlds," Zara said, her crystalline form brightening in what her species considered a friendly gesture. "We are honored that Earth has sent its greatest heroes to aid our cause." Rodriguez didn't smile back. "Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're not heroes. We're soldiers." The distinction seemed lost on the aliens. Zara's light flickered with confusion. "But surely you are Earth's finest warriors? Your most noble champions?" "We're Earth's most effective killers, Staff Sergeant," Carlos Rivera said bluntly from behind Rodriguez. "There's a difference." An uncomfortable silence fell over the docking bay. The Coalition delegates exchanged worried glances. This wasn't what they had expected at all. Admiral Tessara stepped forward, her blue skin shifting to a more formal purple color. "Perhaps we should proceed to the briefing room. You must be tired from your journey." "We're fine," Rodriguez replied. "But yes, let's get to business. We need to understand what we're up against." The Coalition Command Center was a work of art. Holographic displays floated in perfect harmony while soft music played in the background. Everything was designed to promote calm discussion and peaceful decision-making. The humans looked around with barely concealed disbelief. "This is your war room?" Corporal Amanda Foster asked quietly. "It's our consensus chamber," Admiral Tessara explained proudly. "All our military decisions are made through careful deliberation and unanimous agreement." Lieutenant Johnson exchanged a look with Sergeant Walsh. Both had fought in real wars where decisions needed to be made in seconds. Not hours. The briefing began with Admiral Tessara presenting the Coalition situation. She showed star maps of Vorthek conquests and explained their enemies' biomechanical technology. The aliens had clearly studied their opponents carefully. "Our strategy has been primarily defensive," she explained. "We evacuate civilian populations and attempt to minimize casualties while seeking diplomatic solutions." "Diplomatic solutions?" Rodriguez interrupted. With an enemy that consumes entire planets? We believe that all conflicts can be resolved through proper communication and understanding, Zara said hopefully. The humans stared at her in stunned silence. Ma'am, Walsh said slowly, how's that working out for you? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Admiral Tisara's skin shifted to an embarrassed green color. The Vorthic have not yet responded to our peace overtures. Because they don't want peace, Rivera said. They want your worlds and your people. You can't negotiate with that. Rodriguez stood and walked to the tactical display. Her trained eye immediately began identifying problems with the Coalition's defensive positions. Your fleet deployments are all wrong, she said, pointing to various formations. You're spread too thin trying to protect everything. Meanwhile, your enemy is concentrating their forces and picking you apart piece by piece. But we cannot abandon civilian populations, Admiral Tisara protested. You're not abandoning them, Rodriguez replied. You're choosing which ones live and which ones die. The difference is whether you make that choice strategically or let your enemy make it for you. The alien officers looked horrified. Their entire military philosophy was based on protecting everyone equally. Lieutenant Johnson activated her own display device, connecting it to the Coalition systems. Let me show you something, she said. Images began appearing in the air. Footage from human military conflicts throughout history. Ancient battles, modern warfare, urban combat, and space engagements. The aliens watched in growing shock as humans fought with brutal efficiency. This is how Earth fights wars, Johnson explained calmly. We identify our enemy's weaknesses and exploit them. We use deception, misdirection, and psychological warfare. We target supply lines, command structures, and morale. That's not honorable combat, whispered one of the junior officers. Honor doesn't win wars, Walsh said. It just makes them last longer and kill more people. Rodriguez brought up a detailed analysis of Vorthic tactics and technology. Your enemy is using combined arms doctrine with biomechanical integration. They're good, but they're not perfect. They have weaknesses, such as Admiral Tisara asked, despite her obvious discomfort. They rely heavily on their command bioforms for coordination, Foster observed, studying the data. Take those out and their lesser units become confused and less effective. They also show patterns in their assault strategies, Rivera added. They're following doctrine instead of adapting to circumstances. That makes them predictable. Johnson highlighted several tactical points. Their bioships need regular feeding cycles. Disrupt their supply chains, and they become vulnerable. Also, their psychological warfare is designed to break peaceful civilizations. It won't work as well against people who've seen real horror. The aliens looked at each other nervously. These humans were analyzing their enemy with the same cold calculation that predators used to hunt prey. What are you suggesting? Zara asked quietly. Rodriguez turned back to face the Coalition officers. We're suggesting you let us fight this war the way wars are actually won. Not with honor and nobility, but with intelligence, tactics, and the willingness to do whatever it takes, even if it means abandoning our principles. Admiral Tisara asked, Your principles are a luxury you can afford when you're winning, Rodriguez replied. Right now, you're losing. Your choice is simple. Compromise your principles and live, or stick to them and watch your entire civilization die. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. The Coalition officers had called for heroes to save them, but the humans they'd received were something else entirely. They were predators offering to hunt other predators, and the price would be the innocence of those they protected. Admiral Tisara's skin slowly shifted to a deep, resigned blue. What do you need from us? Rodriguez smiled for the first time since boarding the ship, but it wasn't a reassuring expression. Give us operational freedom and stay out of our way. We'll handle the rest." As the meeting ended and the humans began planning their war against the Vorthik, none of the coalition officers realized they had just made a deal with something far more dangerous than the enemy they faced. They had unleashed human soldiers who understood that sometimes the only way to save civilization was to become temporarily uncivilized. The wolves had been invited in to protect the sheep, and they intended to do exactly that, no matter what it cost. The crystal walls of the Coalition Council chamber shook as another star system fell to the Vorthik Empire. Ambassador Zara Velthari watched the holographic display with growing fear. Red dots marked the dead worlds, and there were too many of them now. 17 systems in 2 months, she said to the other council members. Her crystalline body flickered with pale blue light, a sign of deep worry among her people. At this rate, they will reach our core worlds within a year. The amphibian delegate from Kethmer Prime croaked sadly. Our fleets cannot match their bioships. Every battle costs us more than we can afford to lose. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 12 different species sat in silence. The luminary delegate floated like living light, dimming with each piece of bad news. The rocky Terrans shifted nervously in their stone chairs. Even the proud Avian Confederacy had stopped their usual boasting about aerial superiority. "We need a miracle," whispered the Zelani trade minister. "Something the Vorthik have never seen before." Zara pulled up a new display. It showed a small, yellow star at the edge of explored space. "Our scouts found something interesting in the outer rim. A world called Earth. The species there calls themselves humans." The other delegates leaned forward. New species were rare, and any help would be welcome. "Tell us about them," said the Kethmer delegate. Zara's form brightened slightly. "They are young by galactic standards, only recently developed faster than light travel. But their world is unusual. It has been hostile for millions of years. Constant weather changes, natural disasters, predators everywhere." She changed the display to show images of Earth. Volcanoes erupted while storms raged across vast oceans. Ice ages came and went. Massive creatures hunted smaller ones in an endless cycle of violence. How did they survive? Asked the Luminari. "Delegate, they learned to fight," Zara said simply. "Our xenobiologists studied their history. These humans have been at war with their own planet for their entire existence. They fought the weather, the animals, and each other. They never had peace." The council members exchanged worried looks. War was something most coalition species barely understood. Their worlds were peaceful places where conflict was solved through discussion and compromise. "What makes you think they can help us?" The avian representative CHIRPED. Zara showed new images. Human cities rose from the ground, tall and strong. Machines moved across the landscape, reshaping it to human needs. Ships sailed dangerous oceans, while others flew through deadly skies. "They are survivors," she said. "Every challenge their world threw at them, they overcame. They turned a death world into their home through pure stubbornness and intelligence." The Terran delegate rumbled like grinding stone. "But are they warriors? The Vorthik do not just destroy planets, they consume them. Turn the life force into fuel for their war machine. We need fighters, not just survivors." Zara hesitated. The truth was, they didn't know if humans could fight the kind of war the Coalition needed. But they were running out of options. "We should contact them," she said finally. "Ask for their help. What do we have to lose?" Light years away on Earth, Colonel Jake Martinez sat in the underground command center beneath the Rocky Mountains. The secure communication array had picked up something strange 3 days ago. A signal from deep space, clearly artificial, and definitely not from any Earth technology. "Sir, "We finished decoding the message," said Lieutenant Amy Scott, his communications officer. She looked tired from days of work breaking down the alien transmission. "What does it say?" Jake asked. Amy pulled up the translation on the main screen. "It's addressed to the leaders of Earth. They call themselves the Galactic Coalition. They're asking for help." Jake read through the message carefully. It talked about honor and heroism, about noble warriors joining a righteous fight against evil. The aliens painted a picture of themselves as peaceful beings facing destruction from a terrible enemy. "They want our heroes," Jake said slowly. "Our champions and finest warriors to help save their civilization. Should we forward this to the UN, sir?" Amy asked. Jake nodded, but his mind was already working. He had spent 30 years in the military. He knew the difference between the kind of heroes these aliens described and the kind of people Earth actually produced. Heroes were for movies and stories. Real conflicts were won by soldiers who understood that survival mattered more than glory. 2 weeks later, Jake sat in the UN Security Council chamber in New York. The 13-member nations had spent days debating the alien message. Some wanted to ignore it completely. Others thought it might be a trap. A few believed it was humanity's chance to join a larger galactic community. "The question is simple," said the American Secretary of Defense. "Do we help them or not?" "And if we help," added the British representative, "what exactly do we send?" Jake had been quiet during most of the discussions, but now he spoke up. They asked for heroes, knights in shining armor to ride to their rescue. "Yes," said the German delegate, "noble warriors to fight with honor." Jake smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. "Earth doesn't make heroes like that. We make something else entirely." "What do you mean?" the Chinese representative asked. "Heroes fight for ideals," Jake explained. "They inspire people and lead by example. They're brave and noble and good." He paused. "They also get people killed because they fight fair in a universe that doesn't care about fair." The room was quiet as Jake continued. "Earth makes survivors, people who learn that the only rule in a fight is to win. We don't fight with honor. We fight to go home alive." The Brazilian delegate frowned. "Are you saying we shouldn't help them?" "I'm saying we should help them," Jake replied. "But we should send what Earth does best. Not heroes who will die gloriously, but soldiers who will do whatever it takes to win." The Secretary of Defense leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing, Colonel?" Jake stood up and walked to the world map on the wall. "We send them our special forces, our Marines, Rangers, SEALs, Delta Force. People who know that the mission comes first, always. People who understand that sometimes you have to be the monster, so others can stay human." "You want to send killers to represent humanity?" the French delegate asked, shocked. "I want to send problem solvers," Jake corrected. "These aliens are facing extinction. They need someone who can make that problem go away. Heroes can't do that. Heroes play by rules. But soldiers know that when your family is in danger, there are no rules except winning." The debate continued for hours, but in the end, the decision was unanimous. Earth would answer the coalition's call for help, but they wouldn't send the shining champions the aliens expected. They would send what Earth had learned to create over millions of years of struggle. Humans who knew how to survive in a universe that wanted them dead. Colonel Jake Martinez began making his list of personnel. The aliens wanted heroes, but they were going to get something far more dangerous. They were going to get human soldiers who had never learned how to lose.